President Putin signals openness to peace talks with Ukraine as the U.S. pushes for swift resolution. Is Russia sincere or setting a trap for Ukraine? Could they be changing course or laying the groundwork for Ukraine's quiet defeat at the table? These and many more will be detailed in today's Flash News. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Tabitha Ako. Let's begin. In a surprising shift, Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed willingness to enter direct bilateral talks with Ukraine for the first time since the early stages of the war in 2022. This move comes as pressure mounts from the United States, which has warned both Kyiv and Moscow that its diplomatic support may waver without visible signs of progress toward peace. But is Putin's offer a genuine opening or a calculated maneuver to gain leverage as global patience wears thin? Meanwhile, U.S., European, and Ukrainian officials are preparing for high-stakes meeting in London this week, aimed at testing whether a breakthrough is possible. According to sources familiar with the matter, Washington has presented a framework proposal that includes recognizing Russia's control of Crimea and imposing a ceasefire along current front lines. While such a deal could mark a major step toward ending the conflict, it also risks alienating Ukraine, which has consistently demanded the return of its occupied territories. Now, Putin, speaking on Monday, said he had a positive attitude toward a ceasefire and referenced Russia's recent 30-hour Easter truce, an initiative that both Moscow and Kyiv accused others of violating. He also suggested that Russia would be open to discussing a halt to strikes on civilian infrastructure bilaterally with Ukraine. He also acknowledged that some recent Russian strikes hit civilian areas, but claimed those sites were being used for military purposes. However, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov later confirmed that the president was indeed referring to the possibility of talks with Ukrainian officials. The comments marked a rare public gesture from Moscow toward resuming dialogue after over 2 years of stalemate. Still, skepticism remains high, particularly in Kyiv and Washington. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently warned that America could withdraw its mediation efforts within days unless both sides show clear intent to engage. Now, President Donald Trump, who has taken a lead role in shaping current United States foreign policy, echoed Rubio's warning, but declined to offer a specific timeline, stating only that he needs to see an enthusiasm to want to end it from both sides. Now, what happens if neither side shows that enthusiasm? That enthusiasm, is the U.S. ready to let diplomacy collapse? Let's take a look at this video of what President Trump has to say.
You know about that soon, if he is, but I hope not. He's got a big force out there, big force. It's a war that should have never happened. It would have never happened if I was president. That's a war, and it didn't happen for 4 years. That's a war that should have never happened. October 7th, Israel would have never happened. Iran was broke. And now we'll see what happens with Iran. We have a lot of them out there. We have a lot of things that we're working on right now that shouldn't have happened. None of it. Ukraine would have never happened with Russia. October 7th would have never happened, so you wouldn't have had all the problems in the Middle East. The Afghanistan embarrassment, probably the most embarrassing day in the history of our country, would have never happened. Inflation would have never happened. By the way, prices are down. Groceries are down. Eggs, which you hit me so hard, I'll never forget the first The first week in office, they were screaming at me about eggs. I said, what's going on with eggs?
All of these shouldn't have happened, says Mr. President. Meanwhile, the American peace plan, which is still being revised, reportedly includes provisions to bring European allies and Ukrainian negotiators into alignment with a ceasefire and path to a permanent settlement. At the same time, Trump administration officials are working behind the scenes to schedule a second meeting between Russian officials and U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed on Tuesday that his government would participate in the London talks alongside representatives from the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. In a statement posted on X, Zelensky said an unconditional ceasefire must be the first step toward peace. A quick one. However, he also drew a firm line. Kyiv would not recognize any territories under Russian control as legitimate, especially Crimea. This long-standing position complicates the U.S. proposal, raising the risk of a diplomatic impasse. Could Washington's pressure on Ukraine to compromise end up deepening divisions rather than resolving them? As the world watches, the stakes could not be higher. Putin's apparent openness to talks may mark the beginning of a new diplomatic chapter, or simply another page in a drawn-out geopolitical standoff. Wow, moving over to India. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi on Monday, in a high-stake visit that could define the future of India and U.S. trade relations. The meeting comes as India scrambles to avoid sweeping American tariffs and secure a bilateral trade agreement with the Trump administration. But with U.S. tariffs looming and China's shadow growing, is India truly negotiating from a position of strength or merely trying to prevent economic fallout? Now, Vance on a 4-day visit to India, accompanied by his wife Usha Vance and their children, described the trip as personal, yet the political weight of the visit was undeniable. According to statements from both governments, the leaders positively assessed the progress in bilateral cooperation and trade negotiations, signaling cautious optimism. The White House also confirmed that a framework for further talks had been laid, but offered no timeline for a final deal. Now, while the Trump administration insists its tariff strategy is a calculated pressure tool meant to contain China, the side effects are now being felt by allies alike. For New Delhi, which is India, aims to have more than double its trade with the U.S. to $500 billion by 2030. The question is Washington's strategy to curb Beijing's influence simultaneously pulling India closer or squeezing it into a corner? Now, Vance's visit comes amid President Trump's 90-day pause and a sweeping tariff plan, which threatens a baseline 10% tax on imports from most countries, including India. Trump has defended the move as a leverage tactic to reset trade goals. But India, which is often dubbed a tariff king by Trump, stands to lose significantly in sectors such as pharmaceuticals, auto components, medical devices, and processed food, with India already targeted with a 26 levy partially paused. The stakes are high. How long can India afford to wait? Meanwhile, the two leaders also touched on defense, energy, and advanced technology. Modi's office said both sides reaffirmed commitment to dialogue and diplomacy and discussed deeper cooperation across key sectors. India, a central player in the US-led Quad alliance, which also includes Japan and Australia, is seen as a critical bulwark against Chinese expansion in the Indo-Pacific. Now, Vance's visit, especially amid talks of a Quad summit later this year in India, reaffirms that alignment. Meanwhile, Modi and Trump have shared a high-profile partnership since Trump's first term. Modi was among the first world leaders to visit Trump after his return to the White House, launching a new negotiation aimed at shielding India's exports from tariff shocks. Now, both leaders agreed to increase Indian purchase of American defense equipment, energy, and oil. Modi also agreed to cooperate on migration controls, accepting recent deportees from the US, a move aligned with Trump's immigration agenda. However, even as diplomacy unfolds, challenges remain. India must balance its domestic industry needs with Washington's demands. At the same time, the US faces growing scrutiny for using tariffs as a negotiation tool with allies. Now, is America risking long-term strategic partnership for short-term economic wins? A critical question right there. India is also trying to use this moment to attract high-impact US investment. We take a look at Elon Musk's Starlink, which has signed deals with two top Indian telecom firms to provide satellite-based internet. Musk has hinted at a personal visit to India later this year, and Tesla may finally enter the Indian auto market after years of stalled negotiations. Now, the Modi government hopes that this tech diplomacy will complement the defense deals and push for deeper economic integration. India remains one of the largest buyers of US military hardware, and a new 10-year defense framework is expected to be signed by the end of 2025. Now, Indian ambassador to the US, Harsh Vardhan Shringla, said Vance's visit comes at a time of global disruption in trade, and that India has a chance to embed itself deeper into US markets and global supply chains. That could be a win for India. But then, still, with elections looming in both countries and Trump's unpredictability well known, the road ahead is far from being clear. As the world watches Washington and New Delhi, India, toward a deal, one final question hangs heavy. Can economic diplomacy survive a political disruption in two of the world's largest democracies? Well, the coming days will determine that. In a scary scene, questions are mounting. If US aviation is safe, nearly 300 passengers on board a Delta Airlines Airbus A330 were forced to evacuate on Monday after one of the aircraft's engines caught fire at Orlando International Airport. The incident occurred as the plane was pushing back from the gate for a short flight to Atlanta. While no injuries were immediately reported, dramatic footage on social media showed flames shooting from the right engine and passengers sliding down emergency charts. With the U.S. aviation sector already under heightened scrutiny, is this another warning sign that safety standards across airlines and manufacturers are just slipping gradually? According to Delta, Flight 1213 had 282 passengers and 12 crew members. The crew initiated emergency evacuation protocols after flames were seen coming from the engine's tailpipe. Now, the fire erupted in the ramp area just as the aircraft began moving toward the runway. Orlando International Airport confirmed on X that its emergency response team acted swiftly, preventing what could have been a far more dangerous outcome. Right there on your screen, you could see that. Now, the Federal Aviation Administration has launched an investigation into the incident. Delta says its maintenance teams will examine the aircraft, and alternate planes have been deployed to help affected travelers continue their journeys. Airbus, the aircraft manufacturer, has not yet commented publicly. We hope that he gets to do that. Now, this is not an isolated case. In recent months, U.S. commercial aviation has faced multiple high-profile emergencies. In March, passengers on an American Airlines flight were evacuated after the plane's engine caught fire upon landing in Denver. Just a month earlier, 77 people died in a tragic mid-air collision between a regional American Airlines jet and an Army helicopter near Washington. Now, are these events random, or do they point to a deeper systemic cracks in airline maintenance and oversight or air traffic coordination? We take a look at the Delta fire. This adds to growing concerns among travelers and regulators. While air travel remains statistically one of the safest modes of transportation, public trust is increasingly fragile in the face of recurring engine fires, mid-air emergencies, and mechanical failures. Experts say these incidents may reflect aging fleets, high usage rates post-COVID, and potential lapses in inspection routines as airlines race to keep up with growing demand. Now, coming to the conclusion of this report, with summer travel season approaching and airline bookings on the rise, can the FAA and major carriers reassure the public that safety hasn't taken a backseat to profit? Well, we hope that in the coming days, we get to have a better outlook. Until next time, this is Obi drawing the curtain on today's Flash News. Remember, we will bring you recent happenings from the home front on Undaunted at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. Until then, do have a pleasant day and stay safe.